Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Director Comey, for showing up and your willingness to be transparent and answer a lot of unanswered questions. A few hours before this hearing started, I went onto social media and asked people to submit questions, and I've got over 500 questions, and I don't think I'll get to ask them all in these 5 minutes. But I'm sure you'll be willing to answer them. One of the common themes that I came in here to ask, but I realize it's not the right question now, is what's the difference between extremely careless and gross negligence? But in the process of this hearing, what I'm hearing you say is that's not what your reluctance is based on. It's not based on a reluctance to prosecute, by the way. Your reluctance to recommend a prosecution or an indictment is not based on parsing those words. It's based on your concern for this statute, with this statute. Is that correct from your opening statement?
It's broader than that, actually, the statute, and it fits within a framework of fairness, and also my understanding of what the Department of Justice has prosecuted over the last 50 years.
So when you say a reasonable prosecutor wouldn't take this case, it's not because you don't think she that she lied in public or that maybe she was negligent. It's because you have concern with the prosecutorial history of this statute.
And not just that statute, but also 1924, which is the misdemeanor. I also don't see cases that were prosecuted on facts like these. But both 793 and 1924.
But you did find one prosecution, and has it been overturned by the Supreme Court?
No, there was one time it was charged in an espionage case, and the guy ended up pleading guilty to a different offense, so it was never adjudicated.
So, your concern is with the negligence threshold, that you think it requires mens rea or knowing the crime. But in all 50 states, isn't there a negligent homicide statute, and aren't people prosecuted for that all the time? And doesn't the Supreme Court and all the courts below that uphold those prosecutions just on the basis of negligence?
I don't know whether all 50 states. I think negligent homicide and manslaughter statutes are relatively common.
Okay, so but don't all 50 states have something like that, and aren't those sustained in the upper courts, those convictions?
I don't know whether all 50 states have something like that, but again, I think it's very common, and I think those are sustained.
So don't we have a history of, you implied that the American judicial system doesn't have a history of convicting somebody for negligence, but don't we in other domains of justice?
We do. I know the federal system best. There are very few in the federal system. They're mostly, as we talked about earlier, in the environmental and food and drug administration area.
Thank you. Now I want to ask another question that's come up here. You've basically related to us that this information, this top secret or classified information, got into these email chains because of conversations people were having. They were relating what they heard before in other settings. Is that correct?
No. Maybe in some cases, but it was people having an email conversation about a classified subject.
Okay, so they were having an email conversation, but how in this email conversation did this bore marking show up? Like, if they're not sophisticated enough, as you said before, even Hillary Clinton wasn't sophisticated enough to recognize a bore marking, to see with the parentheses for confidential or classified, if they weren't that sophisticated, how did they recreate that bore marking in their emails when they're having these discussions?
Yes, a lot of what ended up on Secretary Clinton's server were stuff that had been forwarded up a chain and gets to her from her staff, a lot of that forwarding, and then she comments sometimes on it. Someone down in the chain, in typing a paragraph that summarized something, put a portion marking, C, paren, on that paragraph.
Doesn't it take a lot of intent to take a classified document from a setting that's authorized and secure to one that's not? Wouldn't it require intent for somebody to recreate that classification marking in an unsecure setting?
I don't know. It's possible, but also
did they accidentally type open parentheses C, close parentheses, and indent the paragraph?
Oh, no, you wouldn't accidentally type.
Right, so
someone
it takes
down
intent.
The chain. Right. Someone down the chain.
Okay, so my question is someone down the chain being investigated? Because they had the intent, clearly, if they had the sophistication, which Hillary Clinton, you insinuate, may have lacked. If they had the sophistication to know what this bore marking was, they had to have the intent to recreate it, or the intent to cut, copy, paste from a secure system to an unsecure system. Wouldn't that be correct?
Potentially, but we're not, there's not an open criminal investigation of that person way down the chain. in the
Shouldn't there
State
be?
Department. A criminal investigation?
An investigation if there's intent, which is what I mean, and I think you may be reasonable in requiring that threshold, but don't we treat everybody the same, whether at the top of the chain or the bottom of the chain?
Sure, you want to if the conduct is the same, but we did not criminally investigate whoever started that chain and put the C on that on those paragraphs. We didn't.
Okay, I would suggest maybe you might want to do that, and I will yield back to the chairman.
I thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan.